In the bright glow of fame, their lives seemed untouchable. But behind the cameras and the applause, a darker truth was waiting. These were the stars whose final moments were stolen by violence, shocking, sudden, and unforgettable. Tonight, we uncover the murders that changed Hollywood forever. Number 1. Tupac Shakur. Tupac Shakur was the kind of artist who didn't just rise to fame, he exploded into it, leaving behind a trail of music, poetry, and raw emotion that felt larger than life. Born into a world of struggle, raised among political fire, and shaped by streets that demanded strength, Tupac learned early that survival was an art form. Every verse he wrote carried the weight of his experience, and every performance felt like a confession carved straight from the soul. By 1996, he stood at the peak of his fame, untouchable in talent, yet surrounded by shadows that grew heavier with every passing month. Fame had turned him into a symbol, but symbols attract enemies, and Tupac was living in a world where loyalty was fragile and danger lived only a few steps behind. On the night of September 7th, Las Vegas shimmered with neon lights, noise, and celebration. Tupac was in high spirits, leaving the MGM Grand after a boxing match, riding through the city with friends, music, and adrenaline filling the air. But beneath that energy was an invisible tension, a silent warning that something was about to break. As he sat in the passenger seat of a black BMW, the night around him felt deceptively calm, a brief stillness before fate revealed its hand. Then, at a red light on Flamingo Road, a white Cadillac eased up beside them, its windows dark and unreadable. In the next heartbeat, gunfire erupted, tearing through the silence and ripping into the man whose voice had challenged a generation. Tupac was hit multiple times, the echo of each shot cutting into the fabric of hip-hop history. Rushed to the hospital, he fought with the same ferocity that defined his life. Machines breathed for him, doctors worked desperately, and fans across the world held their breath, hoping for a miracle that never came. For 6 long days, his body fought while the world waited, the hospital room filled with whispered prayers and unbearable dread. On September 13, 1996, at just 25 years old, Tupac Shakur's heart finally surrendered. His death sent shockwaves through music, culture, and communities that saw him as more than an entertainer. He was a prophet, a rebel, a mirror reflecting truths many wish to ignore. And yet, the case that stole him remains unsolved, tangled in conflicting testimonies, street silence, and unanswered questions that still haunt the world today. Even now, decades later, his shadow remains, a reminder of brilliance cut short, of a voice silenced too soon, and of a murder that still echoes through history, demanding a justice that never came. Number 2. The Notorious B.I.G. Christopher George Latour Wallace, known across the world as the Notorious B.I.G., carried an undeniable presence. A voice that rolled like thunder, a confidence that filled every space he entered, and a flow so smooth it felt like velvet laid over steel. Born in Brooklyn and raised in the unforgiving pulse of the streets, Biggie turned hardship into wisdom and danger into storytelling. His debut album reshaped East Coast hip-hop, placing him at the center of a cultural storm that blurred the line between art and reality. But the higher he rose, the more fragile the world around him became, as fame dragged him deeper into a rivalry that the media fed, spun, and magnified far beyond the music itself. By early 1997, Biggie was trying to rebuild his life, focusing on new music and new beginnings, unaware that time was running out far faster than anyone realized. On March 9, 1997, Los Angeles was alive with music, parties, and the glitter of the entertainment industry. Biggie attended a star-filled event at the Peterson Automotive Museum, surrounded by friends, security, and the hopeful spark of a man ready to move past conflict. As the night wore on and the crowd spilled into the parking lot, Biggie climbed into the passenger seat of a black GMC Suburban. The streets were crowded, lights danced across the windows, and the energy felt electric, but strangely calm, the kind of calm that always seems to come before the unimaginable. As their SUV approached a red light, a dark Chevy Impala rolled up alongside them. A single arm extended from the window, and in an instant, the night ruptured with gunfire. 4 bullets struck Biggie, shattering the illusion of safety and sending the SUV racing toward the hospital in a desperate blur of fear and urgency. Doctors fought to save him, but the wounds were fatal. At only 24 years old, the notorious B.I.G. was pronounced dead, leaving behind a legacy that felt both complete and cruelly unfinished. His murder, like Tupac's, remains unsolved, wrapped in contradictions, hidden evidence, and a silence that has lasted for decades. Theories continue to multiply, pointing in every direction, yet proving nothing. And as the years pass, one chilling truth remains. 2 of hip-hop's brightest stars were extinguished within 6 months of each other, both by unknown hands, both at the heights of their power, leaving behind an ache in music that has never fully healed. Number 3. John Lennon. John Lennon was a man whose voice changed the world long before anyone realized how powerful it truly was. As a founding member of the Beatles, he helped redefine music, culture, and the very spirit of an entire generation. His words carried rebellion, tenderness, humor, and a fierce desire for peace, a contradiction wrapped in brilliance. After the Beatles dissolved, Lennon's solo career revealed even deeper layers of who he was. A dreamer, a fighter, a visionary who believed music could reshape humanity itself. By 1980, after 5 years away from the spotlight, he returned to the world with a renewed purpose, a man ready to create, to love, and to live freely. But fame has its shadows, and Lennon had no idea that someone lost in obsession and delusion was quietly waiting for the moment to destroy him. On December 8, 1980, New York City shimmered with winter lights, a place Lennon adored for its freedom and anonymity. He spent the day with Yoko Ono, giving interviews, signing autographs, and recording music that was filled with optimism for the future. Outside the Dakota, his home on the Upper West Side, fans gathered throughout the day, among them a man who had traveled across the country with a single, terrifying purpose. Lennon greeted him earlier, signing an album for him, never suspecting the darkness behind the man's quiet expression. That small act of kindness would be one of the last things he ever did. Later that night, after leaving a recording session, John Lennon stepped out of his limousine and walked toward the entry arch of the Dakota. The street was calm, the air cold, and the moment felt peaceful, until it wasn't. From the shadows, the same man emerged and called out his name. Before Lennon could react, 5 shots shattered the night, echoing across the brick courtyard and sending shockwaves through the world. Bleeding heavily, Lennon stumbled forward, collapsing as doormen rushed to his aid. He was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but the damage was catastrophic. Despite the frantic efforts of doctors, John Lennon was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The news spread like wildfire, cutting into the hearts of millions. A man who sang about peace was taken by senseless violence, leaving behind a grieving family, a grieving city, and a world stunned into silence. His killer surrendered immediately, offering no escape from the horror of what he had done. Decades later, the question that still lingers is simple yet impossible. How could someone so devoted to unity, love, and change be stolen in a moment of madness? And perhaps the cruelest truth is that Lennon's dream of a better world feels both more precious and more painful because he never had the chance to see it realized. Number 4. Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate was the embodiment of Hollywood's golden promise, radiant, gentle, and on the brink of a career that was just beginning to open its doors to her. Born with a natural grace that turned heads wherever she went, she stepped into the world of film with a delicate yet undeniable presence. By the late 1960s, Sharon had become one of Hollywood's most captivating rising stars, loved not only for her beauty, but for the warmth and kindness that surrounded her like a quiet glow. Married to director Roman Polanski, she was living a life many could only dream of, expecting her first child and preparing for the next chapter of her career. But beneath the glamour of Los Angeles was an undercurrent of chaos, a violent cult slowly drifting toward a night that would mark one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. On the night of August 8, 1969, the home on Cielo Drive seemed peaceful, filled with friends, laughter, and the soft anticipation of a child soon to be born. Sharon, 8 months pregnant, was surrounded by people she cared about, unaware that danger was creeping closer with every passing hour. Outside, 4 followers of the Manson family approached the property with a mission fueled by madness, delusion, and orders no human mind should ever obey. They cut the phone lines, slipped onto the grounds, and moved toward the house with a brutality that would soon shake the entire nation. What happened inside that home remains one of the most horrific crimes in Hollywood history, a senseless eruption of violence against innocent people who had no idea why they were being targeted. Sharon Tate, terrified yet pleading for the life of her unborn child, faced a cruelty so extreme it stunned even seasoned investigators. When police entered the home the next morning, the scene they discovered would forever haunt the culture of America. The murders were not only shocking in their brutality, but also devastating in their randomness. Sharon had no connection to her killers, no part in their warped motives, and no warning of the nightmare that awaited her. The news spread across the world, instantly transforming Sharon Tate from rising star to tragic icon. Hollywood reeled, audiences mourned, and the world struggled to understand how a woman so full of hope, life, and compassion could be stolen so violently. Her death marked the end of the 1960s dreamlike innocence, closing the door on an era and leaving behind a shadow that still lingers over Los Angeles to this day. Sharon Tate became a symbol, not of horror, but of a light extinguished far too soon. A reminder that even in a city built on dreams, darkness can strike without warning. Number 5. Selena Quintanilla Perez. Selena Quintanilla Perez was a burst of brilliance in the world of Latin music, a young woman whose voice carried warmth, confidence, and a joy that felt impossible to resist. Born into a family that lived and breathed music, Selena grew from a small-town girl singing in her parents' restaurant to one of the most celebrated artists in the Tejano genre. Her charm lit up every stage, her smile lifted every crowd, and her talent transcended borders. By the early 1990s, she had become a cultural phenomenon, adored by millions and poised to break into the English-language market. At just 23, she stood on the edge of global superstardom, preparing to release an album that would introduce her to the entire world. But while her career was rising higher than ever, a quiet danger was growing much closer than she realized, hidden behind the face of someone she trusted. Yolanda Saldivar was not just an employee, she was the president of Selena's fan club, the manager of her boutiques, and someone Selena believed to be a loyal supporter. But beneath that facade was a possessiveness that had begun to twist into something darker. As rumors of financial mismanagement surfaced, Selena tried to address the situation with compassion. She believed in giving people chances, in fixing problems through understanding rather than confrontation. What she didn't know was that Yolanda's admiration had curdled into obsession, and obsession, when threatened, can become deadly. On March 31, 1995, Selena agreed to meet Yolanda at a motel in Corpus Christi to retrieve missing financial documents. The meeting quickly spiraled, filled with accusations and rising tension. As Selena tried to leave, Yolanda pulled out a gun and fired a single shot. The bullet struck Selena in the back, severing an artery. Bleeding heavily, she ran toward the lobby, collapsing on the floor, but still managing to identify her killer before losing consciousness. Despite the frantic efforts of doctors, the damage was irreversible, and Selena was pronounced dead shortly afterward. The news shattered millions. Fans wept openly, radio stations played her music non-stop, and communities across the world mourned the loss of a star whose light felt irreplaceable. The tragedy was made even more painful by the betrayal at its center. Selena wasn't taken by a stranger or by random violence, but by someone she had once welcomed into her inner circle. At just 23 years old, her life was cut short at the very moment her greatest dreams were about to unfold. And even today, decades later, the world still feels the ache of what she could have become. A legend stopped not by failure or fate, but by a single act of senseless obsession.
Number 6. Gianni Versace. Gianni Versace was a visionary, a designer whose creations didn't just follow fashion, but redefined it. Born in Italy and blessed with an instinct for beauty, he rose from a small-town tailor's apprentice to one of the most influential figures the fashion world had ever seen. Versace's designs were bold, luxurious, unapologetically daring, and unmistakably his. Celebrities adored him, models worshipped him, and Hollywood embraced him as the architect of a new era of glamour. By the mid-1990s, he had become a global icon, living in a world of art, brilliance, and unprecedented success. Yet, despite the fame that surrounded him, Versace remained warm, generous, and deeply connected to the people he loved. He had no way of knowing that someone consumed by rage and delusion was silently drawing closer to his doorstep. Andrew Cunanan was a drifter, a compulsive liar, and a man whose life had spiraled into darkness. After committing a series of murders across the United States, he fled from city to city, leaving behind a trail of violence without a clear motive. As police searched desperately for him, Cunanan's obsession turned toward Versace, a fixation built on fantasies, jealousy, and a twisted desire for recognition. Whether he had ever truly met Versace remains a matter of speculation, but in Cunanan's mind, the designer represented something powerful, something he wanted to claim or destroy. On the morning of July 15, 1997, Miami Beach basked in warm sunlight as Gianni Versace walked from his mansion to a nearby cafe, a simple ritual he enjoyed to start his day. He greeted neighbors, offered smiles, and carried himself with the ease of a man who had conquered his world. As he returned to his home, climbing the steps of his beloved Casa Casarina, Cunanan emerged from the street. Without warning, he raised a gun and fired 2 shots. Versace collapsed instantly, the elegance and brilliance that had defined his life ending in a moment of senseless brutality. The news tore through the fashion world and beyond. Designers, actors, musicians, and fans everywhere were stunned. How could a man who had shaped beauty itself be taken by something so violent and ugly? Tributes poured in, mourning not just a designer, but a creative force whose work had touched millions. The manhunt for Cunanan ended days later, when he took his own life, leaving behind no clear explanation, no answers, and no justice. Gianni Versace was only 50 years old. His death marked the end of an era, a cruel reminder that even those who build worlds of beauty are not protected from the darkness that exists outside their doors. And today, his legacy lives on through his family, his house of fashion, and the unforgettable mark
he left on culture itself. Number 7. Rebecca Schaeffer. Rebecca Schaeffer was the kind of rising star Hollywood dreams about. Young, talented, graceful, and filled with a quiet charm that made audiences immediately fall in love with her. Born in Oregon and determined to chase her passion, she moved through the world with a kindness that set her apart. By the late 1980s, Rebecca had gone from modeling to acting, eventually landing a lead role on the hit sitcom My Sister Sam. Overnight, she became one of television's most beloved new faces. Her future looked limitless. Film offers were coming in, her reputation was glowing, and she was preparing to step into a more mature and promising phase of her career. But she had no idea that her growing fame had drawn the attention of someone whose admiration had twisted into obsession. Robert John Bardo had followed Rebecca's career for years, sending letters, watching her every move, and building a fantasy connection that existed only in his mind. When reality didn't match the dream he had constructed, his fascination began to darken. After an unsuccessful attempt to reach her on set, his obsession intensified, fed by delusion and a misplaced sense of betrayal. In July 1989, armed with a gun and determination, he traveled to Los Angeles with a single target, a young actress who had never met him, never wronged him, and never imagined she was in danger. On the morning of July 18th, Rebecca was at home, preparing for an audition that could have opened even bigger doors for her career. When the doorbell rang, she answered with the same politeness she extended to everyone. Standing outside was Bardo, wide-eyed and trembling. Rebecca, confused but still gracious, spoke with him briefly before gently asking him to leave. It should have ended there. Instead, he returned a short time later. When she opened the door again, he pulled out a gun and fired a single shot into her chest. Rebecca collapsed in her doorway, the life she had fought so hard to build, stolen in an instant. Neighbors called for help, but by the time she reached the hospital, she was gone, at just 21 years old. Her murder shocked Hollywood and the entire nation. A young actress with a bright future had been taken by a stranger's obsession, senseless, sudden, and completely preventable. The tragedy sparked immediate change. California implemented stronger anti-stalking laws, and the entertainment industry reconsidered how it protected its stars. Rebecca Schaeffer didn't live long enough to see the impact her death would have, but her legacy endures in the laws that now save others from similar fates. She is remembered not for the horror of her final moments, but for the warmth, talent, and promise she brought to the world in the short time she was here. Number 8. Marvin Gaye was a voice that reshaped American music, smooth, soulful, and powerful enough to turn every emotion into melody. Born in Washington, D.C., he grew up balancing hardship with an unshakable passion for singing. By the time he joined Motown Records, Marvin was already destined for greatness. His voice carried tenderness and pain, rebellion and romance, all wrapped in a sound that felt timeless. Songs like What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and Sexual Healing made him a legend. But behind the fame was a man constantly wrestling with inner turmoil. He struggled with depression, addiction, and a complicated relationship with his father, a conflict that deepened as Marvin's fame grew and the pressures of his life intensified. Despite being adored by millions, Marvin often felt trapped between the demands of his career and the emotional storms that never fully left him. By the early 1980s, Marvin returned to his parents' home in Los Angeles, hoping to recover emotionally and rebuild his life. But the household had long been tense. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a strict and troubled man, shaped by a deep sense of authority and personal demons that clashed violently with Marvin's growing independence. Arguments between them were frequent, fueled by years of unresolved resentment. In the days leading up to the tragedy, those tensions reached a breaking point. Marvin, exhausted and frustrated, found himself pulled into confrontations that left the entire home on edge. He wanted peace, yet the environment he had returned to was anything but peaceful. On April 1st, 1984, the day before his 45th birthday, the final confrontation erupted. After another heated argument between his parents, Marvin stepped in to defend his mother. Voices rose, tempers snapped, and Marvin's father retreated to his room only to return with a handgun. In a moment that stunned the world, he fired at his son twice. Marvin collapsed instantly, gravely wounded. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. One of the greatest voices of the century was gone, killed in his childhood home by the man who had raised him. The tragedy was so heartbreaking, so unthinkable, that fans and fellow artists struggled to comprehend what had happened. The news spread across the globe, and the world mourned not just the loss of a musician, but the loss of a soul who poured his heart into every lyric he ever sang. Marvin Gaye's death became a haunting reminder of how even the brightest stars can be pulled down by the darkness within their own families. Yet his legacy remains untouched. His music still breathes, still heals, still inspires. Marvin Gaye's voice may have been silenced, but the echoes of his brilliance continued to shape generations long after the tragedy that took him away. Number 9. Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was the kind of performer who could make any room brighter just by stepping into it. With a sharp wit, a warm smile, and a comedic instinct that felt effortless, he became one of the most beloved talents on Saturday Night Live. His impressions were legendary, his characters unforgettable, and his charm stretched far beyond comedy. He was also a gifted voice actor, writer, and actor who brought depth and intelligence to every role he touched. Colleagues often described him as the glue that held the cast together, a calming presence in an industry known for chaos. But behind that calm exterior, Phil's personal life was far more complicated than anyone realized, especially at home, where tension had been brewing for years. Phil's marriage to Bryn Hartman was filled with intense highs and devastating lows. Bryn struggled with insecurity, addiction, and emotional instability, battles that grew heavier as Phil's career continued to rise. He tried desperately to support her, hoping she could find the peace she needed, but the strain on their relationship became impossible to ignore. Friends and co-workers sensed the volatility beneath the surface, yet few understood how dangerous it had become. Phil loved his children deeply and did everything he could to maintain stability, unaware that the simmering turmoil inside the household was moving toward a breaking point. On the night of May 27, 1998, the Hartman home in Encino appeared quiet from the outside. Phil had gone to bed early, exhausted from work, and hopeful for a calm night. Bryn, however, was unraveling. Under the influence of drugs and alcohol, her emotions spiraled into jealousy, rage, and confusion. In the early hours of May 28th, she entered their bedroom carrying a handgun. Phil was asleep when she fired 3 shots, ending his life instantly. The children, asleep in nearby rooms, were awakened by chaos as Bryn fled the house and then returned, distraught and incoherent. When police arrived, she turned the gun on herself, leaving behind a scene that stunned the nation. The news of Phil Hartman's death spread across the entertainment world with a shock that felt almost unreal. A man who dedicated his life to bringing joy and laughter had been taken by a tragedy steeped in pain, addiction, and mental instability. Fans mourned the loss of a performer whose talent seemed limitless, while colleagues struggled to reconcile the bright, generous man they knew with the horror of his final moments. Phil Hartman's passing became one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking losses, a reminder that even the most joyful faces can hide battles no one else can see, and that sometimes the greatest tragedies unfold behind closed doors, in the very place meant to offer safety and love. Number 10. Dorothy Stratten. Dorothy Stratten was more than a model. She was a symbol of innocence, beauty, and the shimmering promise of a future that should have been extraordinary. Born in Canada and raised in a modest home, she carried a quiet grace that felt almost unreal, the kind of gentleness that made people pause when she entered a room. When she was discovered as a teenager and soon became a rising star in Playboy, success followed her with breathtaking speed. She was named Playmate of the Year in 1980, stepped into film roles, and caught the attention of Hollywood directors who saw in her a rare blend of vulnerability and natural talent. Dorothy's life was opening before her like a bright horizon, but in the shadows behind her was a man who refused to let her go. Paul Snider, her husband and the person who first encouraged her modeling career, was charming on the surface, but deeply insecure and controlling beneath it. As Dorothy's fame grew, Snider felt himself slipping out of her world, consumed by jealousy, paranoia, and a terrifying sense of ownership over her. Dorothy, kind and hopeful, tried to navigate the marriage with compassion, but she eventually realized that she needed distance to save her own happiness. As she spent more time in Los Angeles, building her career and forming new relationships, Snider spiraled into rage, unable to accept the independence she was finally gaining. By August 1980, Dorothy had made the painful decision to end the marriage. She was moving forward, working on a new film, exploring a fresh start, and envisioning a life defined by her own choices rather than someone else's control. Yet even as she looked ahead, Snider was obsessively plotting in the background. He bought a shotgun, rehearsed his anger, and waited for a moment when he could confront her alone. On August 14th, Dorothy went to the small home they once shared, hoping to speak with him one last time, to end things peacefully. She never walked back out. Inside the house, Snider's jealousy surged into violence. He shot Dorothy, killing her instantly, and shortly afterward took his own life. When the tragedy was discovered, Hollywood froze, stunned, horrified, and heartbroken. A young woman who had done nothing but chase her dreams was taken by the very person who claimed to love her. She was only 20 years old. Dorothy Stratton's murder became one of Hollywood's most devastating cautionary tales, a story of rising stardom shattered by obsession and control. Filmmakers, writers, and fans mourned not just the loss of her life, but the loss of everything she could have become. Her gentle spirit, talent, and kindness were unmistakable, and even decades later, her story stands as a haunting reminder of how dangerous love becomes when twisted into possession. Number 11. Jam Master Jay. Jam Master Jay, born Jason Mizell, was the heartbeat of Run DMC, the man whose turntables transformed hip-hop from a street movement into a global force. With his magnetic energy, signature style, and groundbreaking sound, Jay helped shape an era that redefined music forever. In the 1980s, Run DMC changed everything. They blended rap with rock, broke into mainstream television, sold millions of records, and became icons of a cultural revolution. Jay wasn't just a DJ, he was the architect of the group's sound, sharp, rhythmic, fearless. To countless aspiring artists, he represented possibility, creativity, and the power of music to change lives. But behind the fame and influence, Jay remained deeply connected to his roots, committed to lifting others up, especially young artists trying to escape the same streets he once knew so well. By the early 2000s, Jay's career had entered a new phase. He was mentoring emerging talent, running his own studio in Queens, and planning the next evolution of his musical journey. Despite his success, he lived simply, with a loyalty to his community that never faded. But that loyalty also meant he remained close to people whose lives hovered on the edge of danger. The hip-hop world at the time was marked by tension, jealousy, and the lingering presence of crime. Forces that often moved in silence until it was too late. Jay believed his studio was a sanctuary, a place of creativity and safety. Unfortunately, it became the setting for a tragedy that shook the entire music industry. On October 30th, 2002, Jam Master Jay was inside his Jamaica Queens studio with friends and colleagues. The night felt ordinary, laughter, conversation, music drifting through the walls. But just after 7 p.m., two men entered the building. One of them greeted Jay as if he knew him, a detail that still haunts investigators. Moments later, a gun was drawn. A single shot was fired at close range, striking Jay in the head. The room erupted into panic, but it was already too late. Jay collapsed instantly, and the man who helped define a generation of hip-hop was gone at 37 years old. The murder sent shockwaves around the world. Fans mourned a pioneer, artists grieved a mentor, and communities struggled to understand how such a beloved figure could be killed in a place he considered safe. For years, the investigation stalled, weighed down by fear, silence, and the complexity of street loyalties. Jay's death became one of hip-hop's most painful mysteries, a wound that refused to heal. Eventually, charges were filed against two suspects, but debates, doubts, and unanswered questions continue to surround the case to this day. Jam Master Jay left behind a legacy that will never fade. A sound that built bridges, a spirit that inspired millions, and a reminder that even icons are vulnerable to violence that hides in familiar shadows. His influence lives on in every artist he inspired, every beat he shaped, and every moment hip-hop became more than music. Number 12. Adrian Shelley. Adrian Shelley was a rare kind of artist, gentle yet fearless, soft-spoken yet powerful in every role she took on. She first captured attention in the 1990s with her performances in independent films, bringing to life characters filled with vulnerability, humor, and quiet strength. Audiences connected instantly with her sincerity, and directors admired the emotional depth she brought to even the smallest scenes. As she grew older, Adrian expanded her talents beyond acting. She wrote, directed, and created stories that came from the heart. Warm, honest portrayals of ordinary people facing extraordinary moments. Her work behind the camera revealed an artist entering the most promising chapter of her life, balancing motherhood, creativity, and a renewed sense of purpose. But just as her world was beginning to flourish, a tragedy emerged from the most unexpected corner. In 2006, Adrian was living in New York City with her husband and young daughter. She had recently completed her film Waitress, a gentle, emotional story filled with hope and resilience, a film that would later become a beloved classic. To many, Adrian seemed to embody the very spirit of her work, kind, hopeful, and determined to leave the world a little brighter than she found it. What she couldn't have known was that a man filled with panic and desperation would cross her path and change everything in a matter of minutes. On November 1st, Adrian went to her office in Manhattan to work alone on a new script. The building was quiet, the day ordinary, nothing to hint at the danger lurking nearby. That afternoon, she encountered a construction worker who had been doing renovations in the building. A confrontation broke out after she criticized the noise disrupting her work. What should have been a brief, forgettable interaction spiraled into violence when the man, terrified of losing his job and driven by impulse, attacked her. In a moment of panic, he strangled her, then staged the scene to look like a suicide. Adrian's body was later found by her husband, sending shockwaves through her family, friends, and the entire film community. The truth of what happened slowly emerged, each detail more heartbreaking than the last. The world had lost not only an actress and filmmaker, but a mother, a wife, and a woman whose creativity was just beginning to reach its full potential. When Waitress was released after her death, it became a testament to her talent and her heart, touching audiences worldwide and preserving the gentle magic she brought to her work. Adrienne Shelly's death was senseless, sudden, and profoundly devastating. But her legacy continues to shine through every film she inspired, every performer she influenced, and every viewer who finds comfort in the story she left behind. She is remembered not for the darkness of her final moments, but for the warmth, humor, and humanity she brought into the world, a light that remains even after the tragedy that took her away.